one thing I wanted to, obviously this is for you and everybody that's tuning in before I give you a little introduction. This is, I'm not Anderson Cooper and this isn't 60 Minutes. You know, I'm looking just, I'm just looking to have a conversation with you. I think you have an interesting life, a lot of experience that I think would be valuable, not only for people who have stutters or had stutters, but generally, I think the art of communication with these things these days and Zoom meetings, I think it's an art that's being lost, right? And it's one of the things in my life that the pockets in time where I have been good at it or have had success, the feeling that I have is unbelievable. So in this conversation, we're going to get into your life, some of the sales stuff, some of the body language, and then some of the public speaking stuff. But just to give you a little pat on the back and an introduction here, Allan, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a world-renowned speaker, an author, 18 times bestseller, 11 number ones, arguably the leading expert in body language, despite no degrees. He went to the school of hard knocks, literally hard knocks, knocking on doors. And what I think probably he'll be most remembered for, the first guest on By Degrees. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Allan Pease.
Is that it? You recorded that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I had one or two shots. Here's the thing with me in this podcast, Allan, I rarely cut stuff out. If you went back and you watched one of the first 5 or 6 episodes, every single episode, I attempt to start it. Nope, that's not it. Then I started again. Nope, that's not it. Then I started again. Oh, okay, then that's the one, so I don't cut anything out.
It's like stuttering.
Yes, that is literally exactly.
Electronic stuttering.
Right. Perfect. So I think a great place to start, Allan, would be all the way back 1952. Was doing some research on you, had listened to some interviews. I know your dad was an insurance salesman, obviously how you got into the world, but I couldn't really find anything about who your parents were, who your mom was outside of your dad being an insurance salesman. So I was just curious about kind of who they were and what your relationship with them was like.
Well, yeah, I was born in 1951. I'm 72 this year.
You look great.
Yeah, well, mentally I'm about 35, but I'm biologically 72. And
well, you don't look a day over 85. So
some days I do. Some days I do.
I feel 85 some days, and I'm 27. So
well, you're right. My father was an insurance salesman in southwestern Victoria, which is a state right down the very south of here, and the next stop's the South Pole, so it's a long way down. And he was a country guy. We lived in the country, in a country village, 802 people. And the sign stayed there for 20 years, lawn population, 802 people. And everybody would say, how come the population doesn't change? Always 802. And the standing joke was every time a baby's born, a man leaves town, So, I'm a country boy, essentially. We had a big timber mill, which was the only type of work you'd have down in that place, or you'd have to catch a bus to the big city, which is about an hour and a half away to Geelong, which is not a big city, but we thought it was a big city. So my father was the local insurance agent, what they call collector. Back in the 50s, the insurance agents would go around, they collect all the premiums by hand. They knock on the door and they collect it quarterly or monthly or half yearly. And that's how they prospected for new insurance as well. Because the electoral rolls and all the municipal rolls would tell you who lived in the houses, who was there, how old they were, so you could work out whether you had good prospects. And he'd take me with him regularly, during the week at night time or weekends, because he was a young, handsome man knocking on the doors, collecting insurance. And it was mostly women answering the doors because the men are all at work.
Right.
And so it's hard to get in and present. But when you got a kid with you, they get you to come in. And I was kind of like a sales prop, I suppose. And if he thought they were really good prospects and they're a bit reticent about letting him in, he'd say things like, oh, could Allan have a glass of water, please?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, would you mind if Allan uses your toilet? Which the answer is yes. And so I spend my weekends and nights, peeing in people's toilets and drinking water all over southwest of Victoria. But the good thing about that, I learned from my father, because you've got to remember, in the 50s, the insurance guys were the cutting edge motivationalists of that time. They got sent all these big 78 LP records on vinyl to listen to these people like Dale Carnegie and Earl Nightingale. So he'd sit around at weekends and he'd play these records. And so that was my introduction to human behavior, listening to Earl Nightingale and Dale Carnegie and others talking about how to present yourself, how to make friends, how to be acceptable, how to make good first impressions. And so that's where it started. So it made sense for me that I'd become a salesman, which I did by the age of 11. That was when
Oh,
at
yeah.
11 you could get a job selling. You can't do that now. And I'd be knocking on doors selling all sorts of stuff that I collect around the place. I go to the local upholsterer and the car dealer. They have all this rubber left over from the car seats, and I'd cut that into squares that size, and I'd knock on the door and I sell it for 20 cents. And I'd take a little bucket of water and a sponge, and I'd demonstrate how you could wash your windows with it. Because back in those days, early 60s, nobody had a sponge. It hadn't been invented yet. They'd wash their windows with a rag. So I would demonstrate for 20 cents how you can wash your car. And I keep statistics of how many people would say yes, how many would say no, how many would tell me to beat it.
Even at that age, you recognize like, okay, obviously this is a numbers game, but you started to recognize if I knock on X amount of doors, I'm going to talk to X amount of people and X amount of results that I'm going to get. Even at 11, 12 years old, you had recognized that?
Well, you got to remember that the insurance business my father was in, that's how they worked. How many calls you make, how many people turn up, how many say yes, how many say no, how many sales you get. So I understood how that worked at that age. And that's the thing about any venture you take on in life, I've discovered since, is controlled by the law of average, the numbers. You make X amount of calls to X amount of people, ask X amount of yeses. You'll get X amount of kisses, X amount of slaps in the face, but you can have some good times as well. So everything that you want to attempt in life has a series of numbers connected to it. You've just got to work out what they are. And most people don't understand that whatever venture you're going into, that it's controlled by numbers and statistics. And when you work out what your statistics are, Drew, based on your talent, your abilities, and your skills, that tells you how many calls you've got to make, how hard you've got to work to get the result.
Yeah, I mean, I had my first real experience in sales at an internship at a contract furniture supply company where they basically put us in a supply closet where they kept the snacks and all of the other stuff, said, hey, these are the people that you're going to call. Here's a telephone, here's a computer. Now get to it, bud. So it's obvious of, okay, I have to make X amount of calls to set X amount of meetings for the account executives that I was assigned to. But when I heard you initially got into the sales game around 11, at that age, obviously recognizing that this is a numbers game, it's a much different perspective of an 11-year-old, right? I feel like it's harder to deflate an 11-year-old. Did you ever get your teeth kicked in at 11 years old? No sales, you came home deflated. I'm curious about some of those days. That's at a young age doing a business that even grown adults refuse to do now because they don't like being told no.
Well, yeah. So if you look at my closing ratio as a kid, as an 11-year-old, for every 3 people who'd opened the door, 2 would say no, but 1 would say yes and let me do a demonstration. And around half of those would buy it, 20 cents a sponge. So 1 out of 3, that was exciting. But if you look at the negative side, 2 out of 3 people said no. 2 out of 3 people said, beat it, kid, or words to that effect. They wouldn't let me get started. So in any venture that you're going into, and in sales, it highlights it when you keep statistics, as you would have learned with the furniture business, that there's more rejection than there is positives.
Oh, yeah.
And so therefore, the quicker you get through the rejections, the faster you get to the positive. And people who don't understand that in any business venture, they're motivated by what happens next. And what happens next in their life is generally statistically going to be negative, not productive.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I've always, ever since that. So I have a dad that's been in sales. Both of my grandfathers are entrepreneurs. They started in sales, and so it's kind of something that's always been inside of me. But it's amazing to me how better off people would be, even if you end up being the worst salesperson on the entire team in the entire world. The stuff that you're going to learn, how to accept rejection, how to be told no, how to overcome a no, how to close a deal. It's like, even if you don't close any deals, you're going to learn so much by being told no, by being told, screw you, get out of my house, or this, that, and the third. And it's amazing how resentful people can see sales as, you know.
Well, I learned as a teenager, applying this to my life, that for every 5 girls, I'd ask them to come out for a milkshake, or hold my hand and give me a kiss. Normally 3 would say no, but the other 2, 1 would say definite yes, and 1 would sort of think about it and be coy. So all I've got to do is get rid of those first 4 and I'll get to the big yes. It's all statistics. But if you don't run your life and your business on statistics, Drew, you're going to run it on what happens to you next. And what happens next statistically is not positive. It's like, when I studied millionaires and billionaires, what made them like that?
Mm-hmm.
Millionaires, which is not so much these days, but going back in the 70s, that was a hell of a lot of money.
Right.
The thing about millionaires is most of them had gone broke at least once. They'd gone down the plug hole once, and nearly half of them twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been down the plug hole twice too, so I know what it's like. But I learned lessons down the plug hole, as you were saying with the furniture business, that I knew after that what I shouldn't do and what I should do to avoid this happening again. And if you don't, you're going to make decisions based on gut feeling, which is not a good move in business.
And almost fear, at that point of, especially after the first time that you lost it all, or the millionaire that loses it 3 times, or the billionaire that loses it a dozen times. Once you get, as an adult, once you get back down to zero and you recognize, I'm alive, I'm still breathing. Okay, I got to figure out how to pay some rent and get some food on the table. But it's like, oh, it's not about the cars, it's not about X, Y, and Z, but I'm okay if I lose it all. I don't want to lose it all, especially if you have a wife and kids and a mortgage and a house and cars. But like, it's yeah, you'll be okay. If you have the right wife, you'll be okay. She recognizes.
By the time I got to age 40, I was so deep in debt because we'd lost everything. Like by age 40, I was a pretty wealthy guy. I really was.
And from the books or from insurance? We're going to get kind of at that transition, but was it primarily from insurance at that point?
Insurance, I made a great living because I was the king of the insurance guys in Australia and New Zealand. So I made lots and lots of money out of that. And as a teenager, knocking on doors, selling pots and pans, I made a lot of money doing that. I could afford to buy my first home, my first piece of land by the time I hit 18. And so the books gave me the big time. That was really the biggest thing. When body language hit the market, I could remember saying to my wife, if we sell 10,000 of these, we'll make $6 a copy to 60,000. Like in the mid 70s, that was a lot of money.
That's right.
Subsequently sold 6 million of it, which was pretty handy. And that's the thing about millionaires, that they've all gone. It struck me. They all went down the plug hole. So by the time I was 40, when we lost everything, we lost our houses, our boats. We were flying at the front of the plane. We lived on the water. We had racehorses riding through the forest from our farm we were growing, had everything going. And in my little hometown of 802 people, I was like a national hero there.
I believe it.
Because I come from what we call it state housing here. The government provides the housing for people because the parents haven't got any money.
Right.
And that's all the avenue. So coming from state housing to doing all that I was like a megastar, really. And I'd lost it all by the age of 40. And my goal was to get to 45 and be worth nothing, because I still owed $3.3 million to people when we went down. And half of that was the IRS. And you don't mess around with them. They don't negotiate. You don't pay them, they lock you up. As Willie Nelson only found out. So my goal was to get to 45 and worth nothing. And I achieved it.
You were searching for zero. You're like, God damn, if I could just get to zero, I would be happy. People, Allan, get to zero. What are you talking about?
Well, I remember
Little do you know.
Well, when I was a kid, my father said to me, and when I was going down the plug hole too, he reiterated it. He said, gee, he said, when I was a young guy, son, he said, when we went broke, we got to zero. He said, you guys go way past that.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Was your dad pretty successful, or was it he showed you what the model was and then you kind of added, hey, this is what I need to do to be successful? Or were you witnessing your dad? This is how he's doing it, and these are the results that he's getting.
Yeah, he was a really solid guy. He was nowhere near successful, certainly financially, as I am, or I became. He was good at what he did, but he was raised by parents who came through the Great Depression. They had nothing. So he was raised in that era where people still had nothing, and your whole goal in life was to try to own your own home here in Australia. That was a big deal to be able to do that. And he was in the financial services business. He was pretty basic for a few years because he kept getting girls pregnant and getting married and then getting divorced and getting pregnant, married, and divorced. And that'll divide up any money you've got. So by the time he got to 30, it was worth zero. And he had me, and I was about 10 or 11 at the time. So as he became really successful in his 50s, which is in 50 to 60, he really came out of himself and boomed. But certainly financially, and to the extent I've done it, no. But he takes the credit for, or he took the, he's dead now, but he took the credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, especially in your what used to be, I guess you are still selling. I heard you make a comment. I'm just not selling door to door. I'm selling by the millions now, which I thought was a hilarious and very correct comment. But I think it's a personality type, a gene, something in your blood that you got from your father. I got from my father. I watched my dad, both of my grandparents do the exact same things. So whether end up being the best salesperson in the world or the worst, I think a lot of the credit of the character of who we are, from what I've seen of you, from what I've read about you, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, well, my dad was a bit of a right-wing Democrat too, so he wasn't going too far financially.
Yeah. So at 11 years old, you had the bright idea of, I'm going to get rich. I'm getting in the sponge game. Did that for a few years. And then did you have an epiphany of, I'm knocking on these doors. I'm selling these sponges that people are cleaning their cars, their windows, maybe their pots and pans. I'm selling it to them for 20 cents. Why don't I sell them the pots and pans for 15 bucks? And then maybe I'll double up on the sponges after I sell the pots and pans. But how did the pots and pans business come about?
Well, my father knew a guy who had, at the time, was one of the formations of a multi-level business selling pots, pans, kitchenware, tablecloths, bed linen, and you'd buy it in a package for $220. And the target market was teenage girls. Their mothers would buy it for them. It was what was called a trousseau. So they'd have it. So when they got married, they go into the marriage, which women did back in that era, having this whole bunch of stuff. And that became fairly big time for me, because I went from selling a small into selling big in my teens. And then I looked at the life insurance business and I thought I could make this go. And that was the big time selling. So I joined the life insurance business when I was 19. I sold my first million at 20.
Yeah.
And it was all up
20. I read 21. I saw 21. So 20 is even better.
Oh yeah, 21's where they gave me the certificate and put me on the paper. But yeah, so that was good. I made a lot of money. I bought a new Mercedes Benz, which I was driving around. I had a house and a car, and my fiance, who I was just about to get married, was pregnant, so we had our first daughter coming. So back in those days, when you're 18, 19, that was fairly typical to get married. In fact, if girls were 20 years of age and not married, everybody get very concerned. The women would gather around and say, like, what's the problem here? Whereas today, imagine such a thing, Now, in that era, my mother gave birth to me when she was 16. That was pretty typical of that era. My father was 17. And he suffered from the couldn't keep it in your pants syndrome as he got older, and so he could get married and divorced, because when if a girl got pregnant back in the 50s, you got married. That was the way it was. There wasn't any if, buts, and maybes. There was no social service benefits, no security, no pensions. You got married and you looked after that person. And all that's changed now, of course. We've got contraception and there is a pension.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, did you ever have any contact with your half siblings or anything like that?
I didn't meet my mother until I was in my early 30s, about 32.
Really?
And she had 4 kids who I'd never met, but I met them over that period of time, and didn't have close contact with them at all, because I wasn't raised with them, and they didn't fit into what my life was. So no, I didn't really. I was raised with one brother and one sister, which was my father's side, because he got custody of me back in the 50s. Because to get custody in the 50s, you had to show visible means of support, and he had a job and she didn't, and so that's how they decided.
Much different times these days.
Oh yeah,
much different times.
Well, today they'd probably lock him up,
Oh, 100, yeah, because he probably wouldn't have paid the child support if he did. Yeah, that's. Oh, that's good. So I was thinking about you maybe 16, 17, 18 years old in the pots and pans business. You were listening to the records. Your dad was taking you out on sales calls, using you as bait to get you in the door, which, again, genius move. If I had a kid, I'd be bringing him out on sales calls. There's no way I'm getting told no. Were you cognizantly thinking about reading people's body languages at this point, or is it an epiphany type thing that you were like, oh, I realized this at 11, 12, 13 years old, but I really understood it at 15, 16, or was it a slow, consistent burn of you start at 3, 4, 5, you see from what you hear, or you learn from what you hear, you learn from what you see? Or was it more of 15 years old, like, oh, I got it now?
Well, I first heard about it on a Dale Carnegie record in the late 1950s, where he said, well, if you say something somebody likes and they cross their arms and sit back, well, you're going to get a no. That's all he said, the only thing he ever said. And that stuck with me. I thought, well, why would somebody cross their arms and sit back if they're going to say no? Then I looked around and noticed when people had a negative attitude or going to say no, that these were the things that they were doing. So I became really interested in watching people to relate their movements to their attitude. And by the late 1960s, I was running a training course for salespeople or salesmen. They're just about all men back in those days. And it was on how to look across the table and identify by somebody's behavior. Are they with you? Are they against you? Are they likely to want to agree? Are they going to disagree? Are they hiding information? Are they being open? And that became an incredibly popular part of that course. In fact, it became a standalone course by 1969. And men were absolutely taken by this, that you could look at somebody and assess their attitude, therefore their intention. But what I also found was when they brought their wives or girlfriends to my seminars, the women would say, yeah, that's right. What he's saying, that's how it works. That's true. So the women seemed to know this, but they didn't actually know that they knew it. Whereas for men, it was like a big revelation. And that was a big
Oh,
thing for me, that obviously men and women have different ways of perceiving and seeing this stuff. So by the time I got to 24, I thought, I'm going to put this into a book. It's so
24. Wait, hold on. I want to stop you there because at
yeah.
24, to have the self-confidence, even before that, you were running sales seminars. Was it just, hey, I'm continually having success. They want Allan to come speak and share his keys to success? Or how'd you get the confidence not only to say, I'm going to run a seminar, a seminar, but then I'm confident enough in myself and what I've learned that I'm going to try and get published and write a book at age 24?
Well, confidence comes by practice. You're not born with it. You don't have it.
Right.
I remember when I gave my first paid speech for $750 back in the early 70s, and I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I got to the point looking like a wreck, and I thought, how could you possibly pay anybody that amount of money to say what I just normally say anyway? And I was terrified about that, but they were thrilled. They thought it was great, and that was where my official paid speaking career started. Prior to that, I'd given a lot of speeches at companies and organizations, but they'd give you a free lunch or a free dinner or some of their product or a set of drinking glasses with a pewter or cufflinks because the chief executive said, oh, this guy's coming to speak. I've got to give him a gift. So I get his secretary to run down to a gift shop and they sell cufflinks and they sell glasses and water and things. So I had piles and piles of pewter jugs and water pouring things and
Right.
cigars. I used to give cigars. I didn't smoke, but I used to get packets of them all the time. So I wasn't that I had the confidence, but I wanted to do it. And that's the difference. Okay, so that's the starting point for anything that you want in life. You've got to make a decision. I am going to do this. I'm going to have this, be this, or become this. That's the starting point. Now, a lot of people get scared about doing that. They say, yeah, but how would I do it? Now, the point is, and I wrote a book called The Answer 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the answer deals with this exact subject, is you don't have to know how. How is really a series of technical moves. And if other people have done in the past what you want to do, Drew, that means it can be done, right? If other people have done it, and you can find out who they were and how they did it. But what you've got to do is decide the what. And most people don't decide the what. This is what I will have, do, or become. And the minute you decide that, your brain starts searching for the how. And suddenly you open a magazine, they're interviewing some guy who's doing this or done that. Turn TV on, suddenly there's an article about whatever you want. Because there's a part of the brain sits at the top of the brain cell, which is what the book The Answer is about, which it's called the reticular activating system, the RAS we call it, and it scans the environment because in a typical day, you've got up to 4 million bits of information happening around you, and your brain can't deal with that. Your brain can take in 2,000.
A
So
day?
part of what I wanted to find out with this book was how does your brain know which 2,000 to take in out of the 4 million? And we got the answer to that. And the answer is whatever you have decided you will do, have, or become, your brain will search for those things. So, for example, all women understand this. They decide to buy a new dress or a scarf or something, and they think it's great, never seen one before, and they buy it. Suddenly, every second woman's wearing that dress or that skirt. You decide to get a new, like, you drive a car, Drew?
Yes, sir, I do. A Ford Fusion.
A Ford Fusion. How long you had that?
I got it right before I graduated college in 2018, so about 5 years.
You like it?
Uh, yeah, I love it.
The moment you decided to get a Ford Fusion, suddenly you saw them everywhere.
Everywhere.
You're driving down the street, the guy next to you driving one, the guy's got his garage door up, it's one in the garage, you're watching television, and there's a guy's in a getaway car and driving toward him is a Ford Fusion. Avis has got a big rental at the airport, Ford Fusion, you see it, you can't stop seeing, and you still can't stop seeing Ford Fusion. That's what the RAS does. It searches from the 4 million bits, the answers, the how to what you want to do. And that's what makes being highly successful really simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, that you decide what you'll do, have, and become. And people get scared about that because I don't know how. And I say, look, how's none of your business? You don't need to know how. The how will appear the minute you decide to do it. We had one of our seminars we ran here. We run weekend retreat seminars here. I live on a resort here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this woman, she was about 30. She just got pregnant. She's one of our delegates. And she turned up and she got the news that day that she's pregnant. She's all excited. And she went to our large shopping plaza down here on the beach in Australia. And when she came back, she said, I cannot believe how many pregnant women there are and babies running around that plaza. Like, they're everywhere. Now, the question was, were there more pregnant women and babies there before she turned up? No. Just at the minute she was been told she's pregnant, the what was emblazoned in her brain. All she could see now was prams, pushes, babies, and pregnant women. It's like all you can see is Ford Fusions.
No, it's the truth. It's actually interesting you make that comment about making the decision. It's not about the how, it's about the what. Okay, you make the decision, then you move on. That's where I'm at right now. I wrestled with this idea of wanting to do something like this. I honestly got the initial idea years and years, maybe 3.5 to 4 years ago when I was living in Dallas, Texas, based off of one conversation. I wrestled with myself. I gave every excuse that I possibly could think of to myself of why this wouldn't work. Allan Pease is never going to respond back to your email. Lee Lovett's never going to talk to you. There's a million different things. And at one point, right before the end of last year, December of last year, I said, you at 60 years old, if you don't do this, you could go on to be a millionaire in sales, do whatever you want to do. At 60 years old, I could see you being a bitter old man because you didn't even try. You didn't even if you fail, even if this doesn't work out and nobody watches, I don't affect a single bit of change in this world from this. At least I put myself out there and tried. So at around Christmas time, I made the decision. Probably the first few weeks of January, I recorded 4 or 5 videos, which was about me. I explained, hey, this is how this dream started, who I am, where I'm from, how did I get through high school, how did I get through college, my first few jobs. And then from there, I still wrestled after I had everything done on a hard drive. I still wrestled for another 2 weeks of, oh, do I post it? I don't know if this is going to work. And one day I said, I'm doing it. And then I reached out to Allan and I get a response back the next day. It's like,
you reached out to me.
Yes, you were arguably one of the first few people that I reached out to. And I was like, you wasted so much time, Drew, because of every excuse that you could possibly think of. But you're right. It's make the decision. You'll figure it out.
Well, that was good because I don't usually do these. If they don't have an audience of 1 million or more, I don't do them.
I've got zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
I know that. Yeah. When you wrote me that letter and that email and you talked about what you were doing and why, I said, I'm going to give this guy a break. You need to listen to me and kick it. I didn't know I was the first, but I'm quite honored to be the first. But you'll stick this in your archives and this will go on to help other people who watch this to become better at their own lives and do more.
Yeah. I mean, it's just make the decision, you have to make the decision.
Ford Fusion. Yeah. You see it
exactly. Pregnant ladies. So you made the decision to transition. Pots and Pans treated you well, got you some property, got you a house, probably got you a few toys. You made the decision to hop into insurance. Were you a success immediately at 19?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
It took me a few months to get. It was a different. I moved from the country in Victoria to Melbourne, which is a city which had about 2 million people. It was the big smoke as it was, and I didn't know anybody, so it means I had to work cold calling on people I didn't know, which is the hardest way you could do it. But I just decided I would learn how to do that, and I'd become an expert in cold calling, which I did, and I put out a 4-pack in 1972. On how to cold call prospects, how to find them and ring them when they don't know and get an appointment. There's a 4-pack on this brand new medium called audio cassette. Nobody had ever seen this before. There's little tiny things. You have all this information on it. But when they bought this cassettes for $75, I had to give them a Sony cassette player because nobody had a cassette player. And so that was where it all started, packaging it. And then packaging handbooks, which included how to read customers across the table. We sold that for $20 at seminars and back of room, and that was just photocopied 20-page folder, and people would knock me over in the rush to get one. That's why I decided that this will make a great book. And I only went to year 10 at school, so I failed English. I wasn't any good at doing English at all. But the point is, I decided I will become a great author. Now, I can remember relatives saying, but how? You're hopeless at school, Alan. How are you going to? I said, I don't know how, but that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, come on, give it a break. But once you become a motor mechanic or something with your hands, you're good with your hands, play the guitar in a rock and roll band, be a professional musician. You couldn't write to save your life. I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's what I'm going to do. And this is what you do. When you decide to do something, whatever it is you decide you want to do, have it become. You decide, that's what I'm going to do. End of story. Full stop, over and out, no more discussion. And if people keep hammering you, but how, stop telling them. Just don't tell them. And the worst offenders of this, your family.
Yeah.
If you go on the street and tell 10 complete strangers, I'm going to set up an audio business, a video business, a podcast, I'm going to become all successful. What would 10 strangers say to you, Drew?
Nice. Good luck.
Good. Yeah, go for it, pal. Yeah, well,
yeah.
Good on you. Good luck. Well, here's $50. I'll help you.
Right.
And so strangers will give you. You go and tell 10 rallies what you're going to. You're going to do what you went to school to learn to this skill, and now you're going to sit behind a damn microphone and rave on. Only tell people who will support you and back you. And sadly, the ones who don't are the ones you'd expect who do, and they're family members, and they're doing that because a couple of reasons. One is they're worried that you might fail and lose your money, lose your self-esteem, and not do well. So they're generally concerned, because when you say you're going to do this or you're going to become a great salesman or a great writer, they say to themselves, well, if I became a great writer or did podcasts, how would I go? And they can't see themselves doing it because they don't want to do it. So they give you all their reasons why it doesn't work, which means the only people who can really give you advice on anything you're going to do is somebody who is currently successfully doing it or has done it. Because I can tell you, this is how it works. Here are the pitfalls. Here's what you do. Here's how you get ahead. People who haven't done it, they can only give you their opinion what would happen to them if they tried it.
It's unfortunate that it is that way. But I mean, you hit the nail on the head of, it's the nature of a parent. It's the nature of a brother. It's the nature of a sister especially.
What's two things. One is that they're worried that you might fail and they don't want to see you fail. So that's a parental relationship situation. The other is they think, well, if you do this and you go really well at it, it's going to point out how bad I am because I'm not doing anything with my own life. And so by stopping you, we can all get together in a failure club and we'll talk about how tough the world is and how tough life is. As long as you know this and understand it, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that's what it is. As long as you understand it and expect that the people you want to support you probably won't. They'll be negative about it. But find people who are doing it or have done it, or even complete strangers, and they'll give you an honest opinion about what they think.
Or just don't say a word. Like in the process of starting this, I haven't even had the conversation with my mom and dad yet. And they are the most supportive people in the world. I know that they're going to be positive about it, but it was a fact of, I've already given myself enough excuses. I don't need any, whether it's a positive or negative opinion. I need to do this and say, hey, I'm in the midst of doing this, not I'm thinking about doing this. I'm in it. This is what's going to happen.
Well, see, what happens when you set a really clearly defined goal that I am going to do this, whatever it is. So now it's so clear, you can taste it, you can see it, you can feel it, but you still don't know how. Now, seeing a clearly defined goal in the future, what gives you motivation when obstacles and roadblocks get in the way, because they do. And excuses only keep coming up and become believable when you don't have a clearly defined end goal. Because the clearly defined end goal and what it's going to do for you is what motivates you to keep going. So when obstacles get in the way, you jump around them, get over it, find a way to defeat it. If you haven't got a clearly defined goal, you're motivated by what happens next, which, as we know, is not likely to be a positive thing.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you the question of, because people run into the problem of golden handcuffs, right? Is I'm in a job that I might not necessarily like, but I've got the house, I've got the kids. You were very successful in sales. I'd imagine you had a couple cars, you had the house. You
Yeah.
weren't 100%. Obviously, you were making a little bit of money in the speeches
Right.
and in the cassettes, but that's a big leap to go. I'm going to leave this thing that I'm potentially making millions of dollars a year, and I'm going to go, I might make $50,000 doing this. How'd you
Yeah.
make that decision, Allan?
Well, I started speaking regularly 30, 40 times a year in the early 70s when I was in my early 20s, because I was winning all these awards for selling. And so you get invited to go to companies and talk about how you sell.
Right.
And that's where it started. And I started talking only in the insurance business, but then people who saw me at those meetings jumped me out of that into other businesses. Suddenly I'm going in other businesses, then around Australia, then Australia, New Zealand, then Southeast Asia. And everybody was absolutely taken by this idea of this thing I'd called body language, that you could look at someone and assess what their intent might be by their behavior. And I decided I'll write this into a book. I could probably sell 10,000 copies. Thought this would be good. And I worked it out. I won't go to a publisher. Well, I went to publishers, but they didn't know me, didn't know the subject, didn't know what it was about. They thought it sounded like a sex book or something.
Read the
And so,
first draft, like, man, this guy can't even write. We're going to publish him.
yeah, I still have in my file here in the office 52 letters of rejection from American publishers, big ones. That because when I made the book successful here in Australia, it became very successful. I published it myself. I worked out how to publish it. So how are you going to publish it? I don't know, but I'll do it. And I found people who'd done this, most Americans, and they showed me what to do. And so I published it here and got couriers and taxis to deliver it from my garage, which I call my warehouse, to bookstores. And suddenly, when I went on TV and started selling it on TV, this is the greatest thing. And it became number one. And we sold about 30,000 books in that first year, which is a lot of books.
That's a ton of books.
Yeah, I made $6 a book, $180,000 in the mid 70s. It was fabulous. So then I decided I'm going to make this worldwide, because this is going to go everywhere. And the biggest market was obviously the United States. They had like nearly 200 million people. So I wrote all these letters from the Yellow Pages phone book, because there was no computers. I went down to the local library, wrote out all these letters, hand typed them all to all the Americans, and I've still got these 50 odd letters from some of the biggest publishers saying, we've never heard of this, never heard of you, it won't work. In fact, one of the biggest, who is now HarperCollins, who was one of my publishers in the end, they just said, look, it might apply to Australians, this body language, but it doesn't apply to Americans. And that didn't work. So I got on a plane, bought a cheap ticket and flew to New York, where the publishers are. Got a cheap hotel, and I walked up and down Wall Street, knocking on doors of publishers saying, look, we've sold 30,000, buy this. And most of them said no. They said no. But look, I knew it statistically someone's going to say they must.
You have to get one.
I didn't know what the statistic was, but I had to get one. And the majority of them said, look, you can't see our publishing editor because we don't deal with authors. You've got to make an appointment and your agent comes in. And after about 3 days, I was getting a bit despondent about this. And so this guy felt a bit sorry for me. He said, look, go and see this guy here. He's a friend of mine. He's a book agent and he might be able to sell you. So I went to see this guy and said, how about being my agent? And he said, oh, I'm not taking on you. I said, look, this is really good. We sold 30,000 and I will promote the hell out of this. So I said, all right, leave it with me. And 2 weeks later, came back. He said, I got you a deal with Random House for $10,000 US. And I couldn't believe it. So out of all those calls I made and flying to America, I got one. And that one then leapfrogged me into the UK, into Europe. Now I'm in 57 languages. And that's how it started. It started by, look, if I had said no on the first three, people give up after 3 goes, Drew, or something. They give up after 3. If I had said no, you know, I might still be sitting down in my little country town working at the timber mill. I can remember when I went broke, one of my friends who was 40 as well, living in this little country town, who'd never left. He said, well, you know, he said, if you had started with the timber mill, Alan, you could have been the foreman by now. I said, yeah, well, you're right. But you stick with it. You decide what you're going to do, and you just stick with it. Now, with most things that you're going to go into, most ventures, there's a good chance someone else has done it and done it successfully. So they can show you how to do it. And you ring that person, you ring these people. So I've seen what you've done. I think you're great. Look, I'm starting this business too. Could I ask you, just not too much, could you be my mentor? Just have a look as I call you from time to time to see what I'm doing. And you'll find that the majority, more than 50% of highly successful people will say yes. Because here's somebody who's got enough go in them to ring me to say, I want you to be my mentor. And I think you're terrific. And they all mentor you. So why reinvent the wheel? Find people who've done it and take them to lunch and they'll show you how.
Yeah, by any means necessary. When you had mentioned about the agent, my brain went, he posed as his own agent. He changed his name and said, "Hi, I'm Drew Johnson. I'm this guy's agent," but it's really you the whole time. But
oh yeah, I did lots of that in the early stages. When I first got on television here in Australia, I was my own agent.
Yeah, I believe it.
I was Allan Victor, which is my middle name. And I realized we've got this guy who's written this book, and here are the 5 questions you'd ask him, and here are his 5 answers, and he's really funny, and you'd love the guy. And they go, well, I never heard of you, but they put you on a list. And suddenly they have somebody drop out of that TV show, which is what happened here. And I got a call. This guy's dropped out. Can you come and fill in? And I did. And body language became #1 here. And then I leapfrogged that same principle into everywhere in the world.
I'm already seeing it with emails and reaching out to people that I wouldn't have expected, but I get a response back, not necessarily from that person, but on their team, and saying, hey, there's a queue going on. This person has a lot on their plate. We're going to add you to the list. And then I respond back. I completely understand. I appreciate you adding me on the list. If it's okay with you, I'm going to continually follow up periodically, and hopefully we can find some time on the calendar. Every single person has said, absolutely, Drew, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Every single person.
That's called camping out. You set up a tent in their backyard and live there.
I'm not leaving, Alan. I'm here to stay. Well, you might as well make me a plate, baby. I'm not going anywhere. So the first book, Body Language Expert, I'm about 30% in. The information is incredible, but one thing that stood out to me, you're hilarious. I was laying in bed reading this book, laughing out loud. Like, I wrote a few things down. The Prince Charles bosom buddy, the human sneering, you wouldn't want to date this person, the Bill Clinton answering questions about Monica Lewinsky. Oh, I was laying in bed laughing out loud seeing some of these. So I'm about 30% in. The information is awesome, but I had to at least comment about it's hilarious. Obviously, the information's very serious, but there's pockets of stuff that's very, very, very funny.
What I discovered back in the early 70s, Drew, was speaking and writing, because what I write is an extension of my speaking. It's a different medium, and today I'm really good. I don't really like doing it that much. I don't like writing books much. I don't.
Really?
I find it a struggle. I really do. It's a totally different medium to speaking, but it's the hub of the wheel that makes everything else go. So that's why I did it for so long. Barbara, my wife, who's now my co-author, she loves doing it, which is great, because I've never liked it. I'll do what's necessary to avoid it.
Yeah, which
I married her. I married her because I knew she'd do it.
You guys have a great writing style. I was reading about how you guys write, and you mentioned, I write from a man's perspective. I give it to her. She does all the corrections, writes from a woman's perspective, and then we hand it off to a select few friends that we trust, then get their opinion. I think that's a fantastic writing process.
Well, it makes sense, because like 90% of all self-help and self-development books are written by women, and 90% of the readers are women. So men just don't buy these books, because as they read it, they're reading a female perspective and they can't identify with it. So we figure we're going to write everything from a dual perspective. So if a woman reads one of our books, such as Why Men Don't Listen When We Can't Read Maps, which has been our biggest seller, 14 million copies of this so far.
Wow.
And if a woman reads that, she thinks it's written by a woman who lives locally. When the guy reads the same book, he thinks it's written by a guy who lives locally. And we found it doesn't matter whether they're in Iceland or Holland or in Botswana in Africa, they still think the authors must be local, because we're talking about common issues and the common things that happen between men and women. And what I found back in the early 70s, there's 3 things to make this work. Number one is everybody loves to laugh, and that's why we like comedians. And we like to watch Seinfeld and all the really funny stuff, because we love laughing. It creates endorphins in our body, makes us feel good. That's the first thing, is to be funny. And a comedian back in the early 70s or mid 70s, a comedian would get paid $1,000, a really good comedian, to give a comedy speech after dinner and so on. Then you've got a trainer. A trainer has a technique of teaching you data and information to make you more skilled. And that person got paid $1,000 to do that. And if somebody was a celebrity, they get paid $1,000 just because they were a football player or a cricket player or a celebrity, because everybody knows them. So I figured early, I'm going to be really funny, have intelligent, factual information, and I'm going to become a celebrity, and I'll get $3,000. And that's what happened.
Checking all three boxes.
You tick all three boxes. That way I've got a wide. So by the 1980s, I was doing 200 gigs a year. It was absolutely massive.
Wow.
And COVID put an end to all that. Of course, it stopped all meetings. It's coming back now slowly. Half of it's online, like we're doing now. The other half is live. But it's, that I decided to cover all three bases. So the one after dinner, I can do that because I know I can be a comedian while giving intelligent information. We want an opening speaker or a closing speaker for our conference. I can do that because I know that they want something powerful, dynamic, with humor in it. And also everything I do is factual and science-based. So we cover all three bases. And then Barbara and I write it together back and forth, so it has a male and female's perspective. That gives us the appeal to most people. And we only write books about things that every person on this planet wants to know about. And I learned that one early, that when I wrote body language, I knew it was going to be successful. I couldn't have imagined how successful it was going to become. I'd like to say I did, but I didn't. I thought in Australia, if I sell 10,000 copies, this is going to be amazing.
Right.
And what am I talking about? What did I say, Drew?
I was so locked in. I was so locked into what you were saying that I honestly forgot where the genesis of that question started from. I got it. I wrote it down about how you had to check all three boxes. Laughed, you had to speak intelligently with intelligent information, then be a celebrity, and you decided, you know what? If these other people are getting $1,000 and I'm getting $1,000, I'd like 3,000. So I might as well do all three.
So it means I can fill the box as a comedian, even though I don't do straight comedy, but it's always got an intelligent base in it. So you'll learn at least three things, even though I'm doing comedy. Or I can do the main keynote to open or close the conference, which is largely motivational, but it's got to be solid plus humorous. I can do that as well. Or I can do interviews on a highly technical nature on human behavior, for media, where you can't, if you're humorous and funny, they take it as flippant. So I can sort of fill all boxes, and that's been, I think that's been an important thing. Humor, factual stuff, and what was the third one? You're writing them down. Humor.
Really good memory. I think the third one was really good memory.
I wrote a book on memory.
Did you really? Did you read it? Did you read it?
That's what I did. I forgot where I put it.
Oh. So before we get into a little bit more public speaking, that's an aspiration of mine. So I definitely want to ask you some questions about that.
What's going on?
Well, I haven't had an the excuse is going to come out of my mouth and you're going to tell me, Drew, that's bullshit. I guess I just haven't really looked for the opportunity. It's not that I don't have the opportunity. I haven't put myself out there to get the opportunity.
Okay.
Have you ever had imposter syndrome throughout this whole process?
Ever had what?
Imposter syndrome. Have you ever heard of imposter syndrome?
Oh, well, that's an extension of fake it till you make it, isn't it?
100%. That, if you're a well-known actor, but you inside, you don't necessarily believe that you think you deserve the success. You don't think you're that good. Yeah.
Well, I mean, almost all actors suffer from that because they become an expert at being somebody else because they don't like themselves that much.
Right.
And I find the same thing with comedians. When I work at seminars with, really famous comedians, on stage, they are a riot. Off stage, they're normally miserable, terrible people to be around. They really are negative. And that's a large part of imposters. And with actors, they really don't like who they are usually. So they become someone else and they stay as that other person the whole time. Because, and you'll see this when you look at some actors who are really powerful on screen. You see them being interviewed and they're hopeless. You know, they're just really wimpy type people. But that's the ultimate of imposter syndrome.
How did you deal with it personally?
Well, I definitely did have that for a long time because I come from a small country town of state housing. And you know, the ultimate thing was to become the foreman at the mill. You know, that was it. And I
Big
made
success.
I made a decision as a teenager. I'm going to become a millionaire. I didn't even know what that meant. I really didn't know that. And all my mates say, "How are you going to do that? Like here we are in this little country. How are you going to be a millionaire?" And I said, "I don't know, but that's what I'm going to do." And if they kept asking me, I just stopped telling them. Just decide that's what I'm going to do. End of story, over and out. Now, this is how clear you've got to be on everything you do. It's an end of story. And if people keep asking you, just don't tell them anymore because they don't get it. Now, tell people who've done it or are doing it, and they'll be impressed and they'll show you what to do. So, yeah, I did suffer from that because suddenly here I am on stage. I'm on national television. Now I'm touring the world, but I'm still mentally a kid from a small country town. And I used to say to myself, I've got to pinch myself that this is actually happening. The places I was going and the people I was meeting and, you know, presidents and prime ministers asking me their opinion about what they should do. And then I realized that they've got imposter syndrome too. You know, suddenly they're the president or prime minister and they decided to do that. That's the one thing they did have in common. They decided they're going to be the president or prime minister. And suddenly there they are. And they've come from, like one of our prime ministers, small country town, state housing. Well, actually, our current prime minister, small country town, state housing too. And when he talks, he sounds like he's still there, unfortunately. But yeah, but how do you deal with it? I think just practice. I mean, I decided what I was going to do and what I was going to become. It was so strong that I would not let anything else get in the way. Nothing. And that's how clear you've got to be. It's simple, Drew. I mean, it's not easy to do that, but it is simple to do it. And it all starts with the what. What will I have, do, or become? And if you can clarify that and write it down and just look at it, and it's scary because you don't know how. If you knew how, you would have already done it or be currently doing it, right?
That or you put.
Right now, I'm learning how to shuffle dance.
Would you please show us, Allan?
No, I haven't got any pants on. I'm sitting in my studio with no pants on. But you know what shuffle dancing is, right? I've got all the videos on YouTube. I learned how to moon dance about 15 years ago when I watched Michael Jackson doing it.
Yep.
And I mean, it's a silly little thing, but if I get on stage and moon dance across the stage, the audiences go crazy.
Yeah.
There's this old guy moon dancing. So my wife and I now are learning. We've only just started the last 3 days learning how to shuffle dance. And when you watch it, I said to Barbara, I said, this is so cool and so simple. You ever tried it?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, that's really hard on the joints and really difficult. So I'm going through the slow moves, getting the slow moves right. And by next Monday, I'll speed them up a bit. So within about 3 weeks, I should be a reasonable shuffle dancer. Within 3 months, I'll be a very competent one that can do all the stuff I'm watching on YouTube. How I'm going to do it with my knees and hips yet, I don't know. That's not the point. I'm going to do it. I'll work out how to do it because it's damn good fun. It looks like fun. But when I started it, I didn't realize how big a challenge it was going to be. But because I want to do it so badly, I'm not going to give myself excuses. Oh, well, you know, I've had 32 broken bones in my life through semi-professional martial arts, and I've been in car accidents, and I've put myself in situations where I've broken everything, and I can give myself reasons why I shouldn't learn to shuffle dance. In fact, all my relatives, you're going to do that. What about your knees? What about your hips? No, what about your knees and hips is what they're really saying. Now, I worked out how to do it. So I got back into the gym, and I'm in the gym every day, stretching, walking in water, doing everything to make, so I'm going to be ready to be able to do this.
I'm going to keep an eye out for you in some music videos out in the background shuffling, doing some shuffle dancing.
None of the background's on.
I got a few just like random questions that I had as I was reading your book before we get into some public speaking. And I'd imagine you got a busy day Friday, so I'll see if I can get you out of here at the time that we agreed on.
I don't do anything Friday.
Oh, okay. Then maybe I'm going to keep you for the next 3 hours. I got nothing else going on either.
Oh, actually, no, I do have a few things. You're right. And when I was 17, it's something you find interesting too.
Please.
When I was 17, living in my little country town, a friend of mine who was 18 had his driver's license, and he bought an MG motor car, and one of the racing cars. You sit right on the back, and he drove me around. It had no top on it. It was fantastic. And I said, one of these days I'm going to have one of those cars. Didn't set a deadline. I mean, the difference between a goal and a deadline, a goal's got a time limit on it. So it was a dream. And then one day at summertime, when I was a teenager, 2 Morgan cars drove into town. You know what a Morgan car is?
No.
The handmade British cars made by Charles Morgan for the last 120 years. They all look like they're made in 1936, because that's the model.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of these drove into town, and I looked at it and I said to myself, I'm going to own one of those. And I bought it 2 weeks ago at 71.
Really?
Sitting upstairs, yeah, and it's so much fun driving around in this wanker machine.
That's really good for you. Hey, that was regardless of a timeline, it took you 50, 60 years, but you accomplished it.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Once you set a goal, you put a timeline on it, then the pressure's on to achieve that. But I've got lots and lots of things I want to do and goals I want to do that don't have timelines on them, because it'll make me get up and want to go to work every day. Work Fridays, which I don't work Friday. Today I'll take my dog for a drive in the ATV through the forest, and we'll see what's happening down in the bush. And don't know what else I'll do. I collect guitars, and I'm playing a rock band, so I'll probably practice a few Led Zeppelin songs today.
There we go.
I think so. But it's not a pressured work day today. Today I'm going to do stuff I really want to do.
Okay, well, I'm happy to hear that for you, Allan. All right, we're going to take a quick break. This episode of By Degrees is brought to you by nature. If you're tired of that constant overhead fluorescent light, your neighbors causing a ruckus around you, that driver filled with road rage on your way home from work, your boss on you about work that's a couple weeks late, 2-3 weeks late, your kids that won't leave you alone as much as you love them from the moment you walk in the door until the time that you put them to bed. Do not stress, because Mother Nature has just the thing. We're talking lakes, rivers, streams, the flatlands, your deserts, the mountains, the ocean. Whatever you need to tackle the daily stresses of life, Mother Nature has something that will fit just right. A big thank you to Mother Nature as the first ever sponsor of By Degrees. We will not ever forget that, Mother Nature. Please shout the code DEGREES into the void, and you will get 20% off your next order. Again, that's shout the code DEGREES, DEGREES, on your next hike, your ski trip, your beach day with your family. Shout that code DEGREES, DEGREES, into the void, and you will get 20% off your order. Recently, I had a conversation with Mother Nature. She said, Drew, I think I want to offer these people more. That's a bit more in line with the experience that Mother Nature provides. So if you shout that DEGREES, DEGREES, the code DEGREES into Mother Nature when you're out there next, you can get that 20% off your next order, or you can redeem that 20% for a bald eagle flyby at your choosing. So again, appreciate you, Mother Nature. Now let's get back to Allan Pease. Right, I've written all these books together. I was thinking in my brain, kind of laughing to myself, I wonder if Barbara ever hits Allan with no, you look really great in those pants, honey. The words coming out of her mouth are telling you one thing, but she's hitting you with the opposite from the body language. No, and she's just messing with you.
No, that's a male perspective, what you just said. She would not, and a woman would never say that. What a woman would say was, what Barbara say is, are you wearing those? Well, yeah. And she said it yesterday. We went out to lunch with her sister who came from, and she said to me, those pants, are you wearing those? Well, yeah, I've got them on. Well, take them off and put on these ones. So I did. She wouldn't lie about how it looks. Women tell you the truth about how you look. Men lie to women about how they look. And as woke as you want to be, that hasn't changed. Because, the old saying is, if you're going to tell the truth to everybody, you better be a fast runner.
I haven't heard that, but I like that. I'm going to write that one down.
People don't like the truth, Drew.
No, they don't, unfortunately. When you started speaking. I was thinking about it's everything's a learning curve. Whether you're 11 years old trying to sell sponges, or your first paid speaking event, first unpaid speaking event. Was this something that you were at the jump you were naturally good at? Were you not very good your first handful of events that you spoke at? What was the progression like of you as you started?
Well, at school, I was always a smart ass.
Same.
I'd make funny cracks in class, and everybody laughed, but the teachers didn't laugh, and I got detention or worse. But everybody laughed, so I learned
Worth
as a
it?
kid. Yeah, I learned as a kid you can make people laugh and they like it, so that became a part of what I did. But when they first asked me to stand up and speak, which is in front of the Cub Scouts when I was 10 years of age, to teach them how to knock on doors and ask people for money for the club and sell things, I was terrified. Really, I had to wear my brown trousers the first week doing that. I was very, very nervous, but I really wanted to do it. So, look, anything you're going to do that's worthwhile that you really want to do is going to be scary. That's the bottom line. It's going to have a certain amount of fear in it, and that's the part of the allure. The fear is driving you. If it's a piece of cake and it's going to be easy to do, well, why would you bother? You wouldn't bother with it. But it's scary, and I get asked the question regularly today when I speak. Do I still get nervous? Yeah, the old saying that you get the butterflies in front of people, but mine fly in formation.
Oh.
That's the difference. But it's like a wound up spring. I've only had 2 incidents in my speaking career where I didn't have that wound up butterfly feeling. I thought, oh, this is a piece of cake. I'll get on, I'll cream this. And I got up and I struggled. I really struggled. Because when you're really on, you're sharp, you're more aware of your environment and you're quicker at it. And so today, I still get it today. I find the smaller the audience, the harder and I'm like I'm now thinking about, I'm starting to stutter. Um, the more I think about smaller audiences, if I think about them, I get nervous because a group of 20 people, which I rarely do, but sometimes I might do it live. Online's easy because you're not face to face. You're only just talking to a camera. That's easy. Face to face, I find small groups difficult. But big groups, like my last big group before COVID, had 48,000 people in the room.
Ooh.
And that was great fun. A big crowds, 10, 20, 30,000. A piece of cake, because there's no individual person who's looking at me making judgments. Small group of 20 people, you're likely to know them by name, or you'll learn their names by the end of the session. So I still find that tension is there, but it's a good thing because, like I said, I never had 2 meetings where I didn't feel like that and I struggled.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you don't have those butterflies in formation or out of formation, it means like how much do you really care? If you're walking up there breezing through things versus I'd imagine you care, but versus if you can't sleep for 2 days, like you mentioned, that's going to mean quite a bit for you.
Yeah, that's true. I did a seminar in Germany 15 years ago, and that was full of treasurers and prime ministers and presidents. And I was the lunch speaker, and I can remember that I really
One sec, I lost you first. Oh, there we go. Now I got you. You there?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think my computer picked up. I said the S word. I have a Mac and an iPhone, and I said, "Hey, SIRI." I don't want it to happen again, and it picked that up.
Yeah. Oh,
picked
yeah.
that up. Yeah. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I apologize.
I did a meeting years ago in Europe, in Switzerland, and the audience was all prime ministers, presidents, and ex-prime ministers and presidents and financial people. And I can remember going to that meeting. I didn't sleep before that one too, even though I was highly successful at everything I'd done. I'm thinking, like, what can I tell these people? And this is what happens when fear starts to fill your mind. And I thought about it and I thought, well, I know more about this subject than they do. I'll make it quick and funny. And I did. It was great. They didn't want to hear anything too heavy. It was a lunch meeting. But yes, I still get the butterfly, not that often. And if I do, I've got techniques to be able to overcome it, like stuttering. The biggest problem I had as a teenager with girls was stuttering.
Yeah.
When I was talking to a girl, all of a sudden, it was hard. So I taught myself not to start with the words that have, I never start a sentence with TH, WH, or SH. I've trained myself out of it. And worst comes to worst, I'll pause, pause and I can think of what's coming next. And I think it's an innate part of me now. I don't think about it, but if I get together with another stutterer, I'm a bloody mess.
Well, I apologize for putting you through this hour.
Well, you haven't stuttered at all. Come on,
I have a little bit.
I haven't heard a beat yet.
But I think that's the interesting thing about my stutter, and maybe about your stutter as well. I do a lot of mental gymnastics. I've expanded my vocabulary, and I internally, I might hit and then I say the word, but I know, like, oh, if I stutter, you would never catch it, but I know that I got away scot-free, but it could have been much worse.
Yeah. I find the pausing works well, because you can think about what's going to come next and not start with WHSH or T in my case. And the thing about stuttering too, as you know, there's no real established cause for it. Nobody really knows what causes it. There's all sorts of things that it's linked to, like ADHD and bad upbringing by parents who might have bashed you around and so on, or separated parents have a higher stutter rate. So we don't really know what it is. But the bottom line is, I made a decision that this is not going to affect me. I'll just change how I speak. I'll start sentences with different openings.
Yep.
If somebody asks me a question that requires a THSH or even a PH, I'll just say, "Good question." Because once you've started, then you can roll on. Good question. Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that question, because what I was thinking was.
Yep, there it is. I do that all the time. I do that all the time.
Really thought this through. No, he was about to stutter.
You've given at this point thousands and thousands of speeches in front of thousands of people, and I'd imagine you've seen thousands of speeches in front of thousands of people, right? Yeah. When you see people that struggle on stage with body language or anything, like, what do you? What's the best way to word this? Where do you see people struggle the most?
On stage.
On stage or public speaking. Maybe it's a 13-year-old that has to read in class, or a 19-year-old that has his first interview trying to get a job. It's interesting how linked body language can be, especially with people who stutter.
Well, there's two things there. First is that, as long as they've been studying public speaking, for the last 50 or more years, in most countries, the fear of public speaking still sits at the top of the list for people. And it's not just public speaking, but speaking in front of people who you know. So if you've got to get up at a wedding and speak to, they all know you, that's the hardest. You're going to start at that. Speaking in front of 5,000, 10,000 strangers is not that difficult, really, because you don't have a personal connection, which is one of the things I've observed with stuttering. If there's a personal connection, it can trigger it. Like, I've got a brother who's he has the worst stutter of anybody I know. I mean, it's for him, it's really hard. He's 60 now. You know what he does for a living? He's a DJ. And he goes into the DJ booth and he closes it. There's nobody around, and he does not miss a word. He speaks beautifully. The minute he comes out and there are people there, it becomes a mess again. Yeah. And so when I saw him doing that, I made the link that clearly this somehow is linked to self-image in his case, certainly. That when he's around people, he starts to go to water. But when he's locked into the booth, he's got this absolutely beautiful speaking voice. I don't know how you found it, because you're speaking one-on-one, aren't you? You're not speaking to a group. It's a different thing.
It's for me, it's really the issues that I've seen is I've never had an issue when it comes to general conversation. If I get to pick the words in one-on-one or small group, not as much as the group gets bigger, then I start to struggle. But it's if you want me to read these exact words off of this page in front of everybody, I am in serious trouble, Allan.
I get that completely, Drew. That's why when I'm reading auto cue, I make sure they put big words, big letters, so it's not all together. So and then I change the text so there's no WHTHs and SHs starting anywhere. I say, well, look, we wrote the script, but you didn't stick to it. Well, I couldn't start with that word.
Yeah, that's too. I actually have a funny story for you. So the first real public speaking that I did, I was in 8th grade. 13 years old, I think 12, 13 years old. And I was a class clown just like you. If I didn't have to read, I could answer questions. I had friends, I had girlfriends, I was social, I'd make jokes in class. And I had a language teacher, a lit lang teacher, who she helped run the national convention for the school, which was like the presidential election. And then we did a whole bunch of things. We were in groups and we did states and whatnot. And she goes, Drew, I want you to do this. I want you to host the school's national convention. And I looked at her like, are you insane? You want me to get up in front of the whole school and expose myself to the worst bombing situation? I'll look so stupid in front of all of the girls that I think are cute, all of my friends, all of the guys that don't like me. And I told her no initially. And then she pursued me, and I eventually said yes. And then she goes, Drew, do you want me to write you out a script for what we want you to say? And me being the guy who can't read off of a page, I said, absolutely not. You should just lay it out in bullet points. Okay, this is where we're starting. And I walk up to the stage as this convention and the assembly is about to start. And I walk up to the stage, I walk up to the microphone, and I look down, and there are way less words on the page than I was expecting. When they said listed a few bullet points, there was literally, and I turned around with white as a ghost and turned around. I was like, I have no idea what to do. Like I should have read off the page. It would have been better than this. And the teacher was like, hey, we start with the national anthem, then let's figure it out from there. And then I figured it out. But that experience has been a big catalyst to why I want to publicly speak, because the feeling that I felt walking off of that stage, Allan, I was floating. I wasn't even touching the ground. It was the best feeling I've ever had.
It is the greatest. And the thing about, if you're nervous public speaking, it's normal. That's the first thing. Yeah. And I remember when I first saw Angela Merkel, who was the new Chancellor of Germany, a long time ago, I was backstage with her because she would open big events where I'd normally be the opening speaker. And I can remember her walking around with notes on her hand, and she's nervous and she's shaking. And I realized, the world's most powerful female leader was nervous in front of a group. And you wouldn't expect something like that, but she got some techniques from certain people of how to overcome that. And she put those into her plan of speaking. And she was great at it, but she was nervous. And if you're nervous, that's normal. If you're not nervous, it's a problem. If you haven't got the butterflies, you're asking for trouble, because you'll probably come across as arrogant or self-centered, which you don't want to. You've got to win the audience over. And body language, to answer that question, body language, as you'll find when you get further into that book, is an outward reflection of your emotional conditions. So whatever emotion you're feeling is likely to be shown in or revealed in gestures, movements, expressions, and so on. And so all you're doing in reading body language, you're reading a person's emotional condition. You match it up to what you hear them saying in the circumstance under which it's happening. And that allows you, when you're good at it, to figure out what could be going on in their mind. That's how it works. But the reverse is also shown to be true. If you intentionally take certain body language gestures and positions, like, for example, take steepling. Just try this now. You probably haven't got to do this in the book yet. Now, just move it back and forth. Just move your fingers back and forth. Smile, but don't show any teeth. Tilt your head. Lift it up a bit. Okay, now you're doing this on purpose. What are you feeling or thinking right now? What are you thinking?
What am I thinking? I could look ridiculous in conversation doing this, but I'm thinking about something. It looks like I'm thinking about something.
Yeah, or to me, it looks like you know what you're talking about. If you keep on doing it, you'll start to feel like you know what you're talking about. It's cause and effect. That's the interesting thing. If you hold the gesture for more than 60 seconds, you'll feel the emotion that matches it. So somebody who crosses their arms on their chest, for example, we know that when you do that, others who see that give you up to 40% less contact. They talk in shorter sentences, don't give you eye contact, give you less involvement, because their brain's perceiving that you're not participative. But if you put people in a cold room and they all cross their arms, it's a formula for disaster, because they're sitting because they're cold, but they intensely take the gestures, which creates the negative, rejecting, non-participative attitude. And on stage and speaking, you can do this. What you do, you'll learn in the book that you're reading, you'll see the techniques of doing this. You'll learn specific gestures of confidence to raise your self-esteem and self-image, and you stand behind a curtain like Angela Merkel did, and you practice these things, going up and down the soles of your feet, nodding your head, smiling, showing your teeth, steepling. You do that for 2 minutes, then you walk on stage and you own that stage. That's the first thing. Secondly, people who see you go, wow, he seems to know what he's doing. And that's how Angela Merkel did it.
That's it seems like you know a little bit about body language and how it affects human beings. I'll give you that. I got two more questions for you. One of the things that I find when I do struggle, whether it's reading aloud or like I have a good stretch of me presenting something.
Clearly American.
Yeah. Versus yeah, there you go. That's like in the movie Inglourious Bastards. Have you seen that movie?
Yes.
3 versus 3, you know, at the end of it.
Well, you'll find when you read the body language book further on, we did some experiments in the UK and Europe where you go into a pub and you say, we'd like some beers for my friends. And they say, how many you want? You say, that many. In England, you get 2. In France, you get 3. Because they count 1, 2, 3. So that's your 1, that's your 2, and that's your 3. We count 1, 2, 3, 4, and the thumb clicks in at 5. Unless you're English, you go 1, 2, then you rotate.
After 2.
In England, that's up yours.
I didn't know that. I'll keep that one in the back pocket just in case.
You guys use half of it. In England, they use 2. So they go 1, 2, and they turn it. Otherwise, you've just told them to go and drop dead.
I'm going to keep that one in the back pocket. I won't. If I need it, I know where it's at. So I was saying, you know, if I have a good stretch and I'm reading aloud or I'm presenting something, I get in my head of, oh, I'm doing it. It's working. I'm doing it. And then what happens after you have those thoughts? It starts to go like this because you get out of the moment. You get out of you're in your way versus out of your way. How do you stay present in a small group? How do you stay present on stage in front of 50,000 people and not let it get to your head of, holy shit, I'm speaking in front of 50,000 people?
Well, 50,000 people, the energy in a crowd that size is electric. You know, you just
believe it.
I'm fired up. I'm plugged in, and so is the audience. Smaller groups, that's a personal thing. If I find smaller groups harder, but if I find that I'm starting to run down, ask a question. So, okay, well, let's just stop here. Drew, what's your opinion of what we've been talking about so far? Then I'll let you take the floor and ask people for their comments and let them do it. And people love it. They think you're great because they're involved.
It's genius.
Simple. Works.
Simple, but it's genius.
You know, I did a group of engineers the other week. You know, you want to talk to a whole bunch of engineers. My God. They're terrible. Sitting there like they've lost their best friend. So what do you think, Bob? What do you think about what Bob just said? How does that affect you, Stephen? How long till lunchtime?
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
People, that's easy. And the 50,000 I did, they all spoke Russian. It was at Moscow Olympic Center. Translators.
I did read that I think the first time was 1991 that you were invited by the Kremlin to go over there and teach some body language courses which is interesting because historically, if you look at the Russian language, Russian body language, it's very harsh, right? So what were things that you were trying to key on when you went over there?
Well, the basic emotions of all cultures are the same. The basic happy, sad, frowning, angry, even the lost 3 civilizations they found in the Senegalese, in Africa and in South America, they use the same facial expressions and emotions that you and I use to show happiness, sadness, joy, concern, which gives some interesting theories about the origins of these things. They've never seen it before, but they still do it. So the basics are the same everywhere. All the changes between culture are small cultural differences. And most of those now have disappeared because of American television and movies. See, the new generation of kids, what age are you, Drew? How old are you?
I'm 27. I was born 1995.
Oh, your generation, in every country in the world, has grown up with movies. Same video games, which are made in America, same television programs, and all the kids are copying the gestures, movements, and behaviors of what they see. So we did a simple experiment about 10 years ago of filming Italian kids and Russian kids under the age of 10, British kids, African kids, and putting it all on one reel and playing it back with the sound turned off. So you couldn't hear what language that they were speaking, and you didn't know where it was. There were no street signs in a foreign language, and nobody could pick what culture they belonged to. Most of them thought they were all Americans from different cities.
Really?
were using American body language, but their grandparents, different story. Grandpa in Italy will use things like this and this
Oh,
and
yeah.
that and this, which the grandchildren don't use. Grandchildren do, hey, hasta la vista, baby, with a cap on backwards. So cultural differences are disappearing. The only place you'll still see them to any great extent is in the Middle East, where I spent a lot of time. And the Middle East, say in places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, uh, they don't get a lot of American television there because it's banned for kids of a certain age. You know, they're raised in their culture, so they only know their own different little cultural signals. So if you're going to do business in those places, you've got to go on YouTube or get a book to learn how you read these things and how you do them. So you don't go across and give them one of these accidentally without realizing you did it. And Japan also is another culture that older Japanese have completely different behaviors to their grandchildren who are now less under 30 years of age, because they've all been watching American TV, American movies too, and that's where it's coming from. So another generation now, I predict that cultural differences will be just about gone.
Which is interesting because there's for the entirety of time, the entirety of human beings, there's been a very stark contrast between people from America, people from Australia, people from Russia, people from wherever across the world. So that's it'll be interesting to see over the course of the next decade.
Well, it will disappear because there's two things to notice about that. One is the advantage is that when you're dealing with anybody from any culture, you'll be able to feel comfortable about how they're communicating because your brain will recognize the signals. The downside is that cultural differences are disappearing. So we're all going to behave and look the same way.
Yeah, which as long as they don't look like me, I'm good. Last question. You talked about two experiences where yeah, where you didn't have the butterflies. We're going to walk on the stage. When you think of the worst experience, your worst performance that you ever had on stage, when was it? And can you tell me a little bit about it?
The worst one. Well, probably two that stand out. The first one was a physical one. I was on stage with 800 people in Newcastle in Australia, and they had a series of speakers speaking to this audience, and I was one of the speakers in the middle. They only had one lapel mic. And so the organizer said, look, when the speaker's finished, he comes down, we'll take his lapel off, put it on you. You get up and you do your hour. You come down, we'll take yours off, put it on the next speaker, which is okay. That's fine. So the speaker was up there, he spoke and did his thing, came off, they fitted me up. And the cord was about 3 feet long on the lapel mic, and they tuck it into they tuck it in the top of your pants. And I jumped around for an hour, and it fell right down my left leg to my knee. I didn't know this until I got off stage, and they grabbed the mic and they yanked it like hell. And I screamed at the top of my voice some expletives, which went right through the whole audience because they hooked up all my masculine gear and that just about took it off. So that's memorable.
Hey, that's not one you're going to forget.
I'll never forget that one. And I did a meeting at one of the Hilton hotels, and all the conference rooms are on the first floor. And so they said, when you come up there, we're going to be in conference room number 6. And there were 8 conference rooms, small rooms that take 50 people each. They said, now, you're the surprise guest speaker, Allan, so just stand outside the door. And when we're ready, we'll open the door and you come in as surprise guest speaker. So I do that occasionally. So I said, all right. So I'm standing outside the door at number 6. And 1 o'clock comes up. They haven't opened the door. 1:10, 1:15. I'm thinking, what's going on? So I open the door, look in. Anyway, the MC says, anyway, our guest speaker has arrived. Please welcome our guest speaker. So I walk in and I start off with humor. I'm telling jokes and making them laugh. And they're rolling around the place. And then the MC hands me a piece of paper. He said, could you please get on to section 51.1? And I said, just hang on. I said, what's section 51.1? I was in the wrong room. I was in another room with a bunch of accountants waiting for someone to talk on the IRS and tax section 51.1. And I'm in there telling them jokes about body language. They thought it was the best thing ever happened. They didn't want me to go, but I had to go because my audience was in the room next door.
Oh, yeah. They were probably opening the door like, where the hell did this guy go? We told him to wait right here.
There saying, we don't know where our guy is, but they're having a good time next door.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. that's really incredible.
Anything that can ever happen as a speaker, certainly it's happened to me. Everything that's possible to happen.
I believe
But,
it, but
yeah, well,
but
when you put your neck on the line, you're out there doing things you want to do. Things that happen that you couldn't imagine, but they're memorable. See, when I go to my grave, I'm going to go in there saying, "This is the best time I've ever had." I'm going to be worn out and cracked up, and so that was great, fantastic. I won't be getting up on one elbow saying, "I should have learned how to sail a yacht." I wanted to sail a yacht. I bought the biggest yacht you've ever seen, sailed it 3 times. I was hopeless and didn't like it, so I sold it. When I
but you
go to
went
my
for
grave, I might be saying on my deathbed, I wish I had learned how to sail. I wish I had learned how to tap dance. I learned how to tap dance. And I didn't like it. And I wasn't any good at it, Drew. So I quit. But I won't be saying on my deathbed, I should have learned how to tap dance.
That's why we're sitting across from not across from each other. At some point, I hope to sit across from me and do this again, but that's why I'm sitting here and you're on the other end of this computer screen, is because I refuse to be 65, 70, 72 years old and say, God, I should have, you didn't try this, that, and the third. But I can't thank you enough for doing this, Allan. I'm indebted to you. If there's anything that I could ever do for you, you come to America, you need someone to get you some coffee in the morning because the hotel is out, please give me a call. I will be there. Anything you need from me, I'm happy to do.
That's true.
Cool. Awesome. Allan, hope you have a great rest of your Friday. Enjoy the bush with your dog, and enjoy your weekend.
All right. Keep me updated on how you're going.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.